I was like humming along.
We made it all the way through all the music.
I know, it's all working so well this week. Welcome to Story Strategy Live, episode 38. Today, we're going to talk about defining success as a writer, how to build a meaningful writing practice and define success that matters to you. That sounds very exciting, Dawn.
It is. It's going to be exciting. We're going to have some fun. It's going to be good.
It will be good. I think this is a super important topic, actually. It relates into a lot of the mindset stuff we've been talking about this month, and the need to plan and set realistic plans based on where you actually are in your career, where you're trying to go, what you're trying to achieve as the writer that you are, not as the writer that you think you should be.
Right.
Well,
Maybe. We'll see.
We'll morph that around a bit. But anyway, so how is your week going?
It's gone good. It's been all right. I'm making it. I have a story though.
Okay.
That relates to our topic. Like, I'm so proud of myself. But this didn't happen this week. This happened 20-something years ago, but we're still going to talk about it because it fits what we're talking about. So we're talking about defining success and defining what success looks like for you and how it's different for different authors, even though we have the same kind of journey, but we don't have the same kind of journey. So we're going to talk for just a minute about cake.
Yes, so, I totally see how that relates.
Absolutely.
I like cake. Let's go for it.
So back before I had kids and I had random, hey, I don't have anything to do in the evening time, one of my very best friends in the world was like, hey, come take this cake decorating class with me at one of the craft places. And so I was like, sure, I can kind of bake. Like, I've baked a cake before. I know how to open the box. We can totally do this.
But it wasn't a cake baking class.
Well, don't go confusing things with your logic here. I was going to go hang out with my friend, have fun. So we go and take this class. First of all, my 20-something-year-old self did not realize that people made their own icing. Oh. I thought icing came out of the can that you get, with the little Pillsbury Doughboy on it in the grocery store. So the other important thing you should know is that I did not own one of those great big mixer thingies.
Yep. Okay.
Didn't have a stand mixer.
Well, were you supposed to bring that stuff to the class with you anyway?
No. This is after the class. And I also did not have, if you know anything about cake decorating, the spatula things that are the long, I didn't have those either.
Okay. I
had no idea these things existed. And so my friend and I go to the class, in the intro class, and she talks all about how, you're going to bake some cakes, and next week you're going to bring some cakes, and they need to already be iced. Like,
this is a multi-session class.
Oh, yes. Yes. Oh. This was like we'd signed up for like 6 weeks or something.
Oh my.
And like next week, we're going to learn how to do roses. And then the week after that, we'll learn how to do like the basket weave and all this kind of stuff.
Okay.
So I had no idea what I was getting into. Kind of like new writers jumping into this. No clue what I was getting into. And so go home. I baked myself a cake. It wasn't level. I lived in a house that like it was just bad. And so the oven was an issue.
I'm curious how the house affects the levelness of the cake, but okay. The whole house
don't confuse things. Don't confuse things with your logic. No, it had a combination to do with the oven not like having a consistent temperature. So it was like mushy, but if I cooked it longer, it was too whatever.
Well, and I don't know if you know this, but my mom used to yell at us, if you stomp on the ground or slam a door while a cake is baking, it will fall. I don't know if it really will, but that's what she says.
That must have been the issue. So I made the cakes and was like, okay, I just have to ice them. How hard can this be?
Right.
Except for I had to figure out how to make the icing without a stand mixer. So at first I was like mixing it like with my hand.
Oh, yeah.
And that didn't work. And so then I had to mix it like with the little hand, like two little things.
Did work.
So I get it all mixed and I'm trying to figure out how to ice this cake. And every time I like draw my little, slide the icing across, it just lifts up a layer of the cake and it comes off.
Yes.
Because I didn't have the special little tools.
Yes.
And so I may have gotten frustrated. And it takes a lot to get me frustrated. I'm not like a super hot-headed person, but it takes me a lot to get me frustrated. And so I got frustrated and I took my little knife and I just went, and chopped right down the middle of the cake.
Okay.
And that felt really good.
Until you got to cake class.
Well, no, then I did that about 8 more times and just completely murdered this cake in my kitchen.
Uh-huh.
And then I walked in to my living room and sat down and started doing my nails because that was something I could do.
Okay.
And about 5 minutes after the cake murder, my husband walks in from work. And so he walks in from the garage and there's just like icing on the ceiling.
Oh, it's a big murder. Okay.
Yeah, because I was flinging stuff as I was.
And you just left it there?
And I just left it just for a minute.
Oh,
I was going to clean it up. I knew I was going to have to clean it up. But for that minute, I just needed to go sit down. And so he just
sometimes distance helps.
He walked in and he just kind of looked around. And then he just turned around and walked back out the door.
Want no part of that.
Yeah, no. And then he
Mine would go over and eat whatever was salvageable. That's where I live.
And the cake carcass was still laying like everywhere on the counter. And so he comes back in and he's like, so how's your day been? So the cake died. I ended up making another cake. I ended up getting it semi-frosted, whatever. And that's when we decided, like when I went to class, that I guess it was the next night, that I did clean up the kitchen. I did, but he was like, icing on the ceiling. Wow. But so that's when we decided that I was in the cake decorating class strictly for comic relief. Like it didn't matter how big my roses were. It didn't matter how straight my basket weaving was. I was there to hang out with my friend, have a good time. And the older ladies who were in this cake decorating class thought I was hilarious. And so, because I didn't care if my rose was this big. So that's going to kind of go into the defining your success today. Because my friend...
You became comic relief. Your success wasn't about decorating the cake.
Absolutely not. My friend who took the class, so a year or two after this, she made the cake for my baby shower because I was pregnant with my daughter.
Nice.
It was a carousel with 2 different, like this part's edible, this part's edible. It had the little thingies. It had candied horses hanging off of it. It was fully decorated like you would expect a carousel to be.
So she took this class a little more seriously.
A little bit more, yeah. A little bit more.
Or she just had more aptitude, or she had the right tools to start with.
She did have a stand mixer, and
Dawn, I have to tell you, the stand mixer was not your issue here.
No, it wasn't. No, but she was like, okay, so you have to go buy these spatula things. Like these are vitally important.
Spatula helps quite a lot. Yes.
Yes, because I did have to explain to her that I had murdered the first attempt at the cake, that it didn't survive. So
thank God they didn't send you home to roll out fondant. I can't even imagine what that would have looked like.
That came later, and that's a story for another day because there was a lot of annoyance involved. That stuff cracks every single time I look at it.
I got really into cake decorating for a while. I even bought a little airbrush, and you can airbrush spray paint cake. And anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about today, Dawn.
No, but we're talking about defining your own success. And I do not feel my little foray into cake decorating was a failure because I had fun. I hung out with my friends. I got to eat a lot of cake.
Well, here's the other thing, and this does relate to writing and just life in general, kind of. We talked a little bit last week about what a surprising number of writers are somewhat insecure, uncomfortable with other people and experiences. Like they don't want to dip their toe in a pool if they don't already know how deep it is. That's typical of a lot of writers. But what I will say about that is that just as a person in the world, the more random crap you do, like going to a cake decorating class, if you have absolutely no interest in cake decorating, the more of an encyclopedia you're building from which to draw as you write. So like if you know now that flower you were making is called a rosette and that you use a very specific tip to make the petals and you have to put the frosting in a bag and squeeze it and twist the end and it can come shooting out. Like all those things you learned doing that silly class, even though you don't have any intention of ever making another rosette, you could write about it or write about what goes wrong. So I think as writers, the more things that we are willing to put ourselves out there and try, the better writers we can become.
It's all research.
It is.
All of it.
That's what life is all about, researching for your books.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what we should be living for.
Anyway, so this is sort of what we're talking about this week. We're talking about how do you define your own success as a writer? And I think this comes, it runs parallel to the idea of comparing yourself to other people, other writers. Because for many people, I think the way that they define their own success as a writer is by looking at Nora Roberts and deciding that if Nora Roberts writes with 2 pen names and puts out 6 books a year, then they need to do the same thing or they will not be successful. Is that a good way to plan?
Absolutely not.
No.
That's a good way to end up really discouraged and sad.
Yes.
Because Queen Nora has some kind of magical, mystical thing that none of us can recreate. And I mean, yes, would we love to? Absolutely. Absolutely. But we don't have the timing she had. We don't have the same tools that she had because craft has even changed since she started out and publishing has changed.
Oh yeah, by miles. And so the important thing to think about is that each one of us is an individual. Each one of us has very specific challenges, whether they are the 9 children we are trying to raise or the 14 jobs we're trying to hold down in addition to writing, or the special needs family member, or the master's degree we're trying to get for our day job, or whatever. We all have very real challenges that will get in the way of our efforts to write. Even if writing is your full-time job, you have specific challenges that you have to address when you set your path to success. And you have specific advantages that nobody else has. That could be anything from a lot of free time to a babysitter who lives in your house because your mom lives with you, or name it. You know, I'm better at naming disadvantages, I guess. But the point is that each of us has to forge our own path because no one else has the exact same situation that we do. So no one else's success will look just like our success. Yeah.
So you have to decide what the success looks like for you.
Right.
And
based on reality.
Yes. And I
Not
think that
based
is
on Nora Roberts.
Yes. I mean, don't get me wrong. If you hit Nora Roberts' success, we will absolutely support you. And please tell everybody that you used Evident Ink as your editors. But you have to take a step back and look at, okay, so if I'm not going to reach Nora Roberts' success, what is acceptable and what am I working towards? Because you have to find that happy medium between, well, I'm just doing this because I want to do it, which we'll talk about. That's an okay goal. Or, okay, my goal is here. It doesn't have to be all the way up here yet. It's just, we're taking a step.
Well, and let's look at Nora Roberts, because I know that when she started, her goal was not to be Nora Roberts. Her goal was to keep herself entertained when her kids were snowed in the house with her. She was like snowed in and she thought it would be fun to write a story. And the next thing, not the next thing, then she had to go pitch an agent. Then, her steps were small and she's been writing for 30 years more. So her first success was not Nora Roberts, and you should not be planning for that either. Instead, we should all be trying to figure out what this first success is going to look like.
Well, and I think that's a great point too, of a lot of these overnight successes that we think we see. There was years and years of planning and working and failure and all of that behind it. Which is where we come up with, I think this is a Tim Hiller quote. I tried to figure out who it was attributed to. So that's who it was mostly attributed to. There's some other people it lists, but the idea of don't compare your beginning to someone else's middle, because you don't know what went on behind the scenes.
Right. Well, and so that might be a good point to kind of morph into the comparison thing before we talk about really trying to figure out what your specific goals might be. But it's very easy to look at another author that you admire and respect and think, well, I mean, she's not that much better than me. And so why is she so successful? And what is she doing? And once you start down that path, you forget all that stuff we just talked about. And you're focused on things that will not help you.
Yes.
Because there's no point, like, yes, study your comps, understand how the book covers in your market look and what the blurbs read like and how you should be molding your own stuff. But other than, for marketing purposes, studying other authors is self-defeating because you aren't going to be them. Here, I wrote important stuff because I knew I'd start talking and then forget what I was trying to say. So here's my advice. If there is an author who you just totally admire and you compare yourself to that person and wish you could be so much like them, why not try to make that person a mentor? Reach out with praise, tell them what you like about their writing and how much you admire them. And you may find that here's a person who is willing to give you some advice, who might be willing to give you a blurb at some point in the future, who you never know. But I see comparison so many times turn ugly, turn into jealousy, turn into backstabby type stuff. And that doesn't help anyone. So let's go with the rising tide raises all boats theory and think about how you can use that sense of, I want to be like that person, or I want to know how they did that in a healthy way. And look at those authors as achievable symbols. Like, hey, if this person did that, that means I can do that too.
And if you can get any kind of, because sometimes people compare themselves to really successful, really busy authors who aren't going to have time to mentor you. And you have to kind of accept that. But if you can get any kind of peek into their process or into their real world, something that they're, and I think this is one of the good things that's happened on social media, because I know social media gets a bad rap, but there's so many authors on social media who will post pictures of themselves struggling or post pictures of, okay, here's a day in my life. It's not near as glamorous as you think it is,
Right. Yeah.
And so accept that and kind of think about, okay, how can I learn from that? And how can I implement that and see that, like we talked about last time, even the absolute most successful authors have those moments where they're like, nope, nobody's ever going to read this. Mm-hmm. This is terrible. They're not going to read it. And again, comparing to, you don't know what steps in the process they took to get there. And their process might have looked completely different than what you have. And you don't also know normally what their situation is. Like, do they have a writing room that they go and close the door and nobody bothers them all day long? And you have a spot in the corner of your kitchen and 4 children under the age of 10. So you can't compare those.
Right. So be your authentic self, be true to who you are. And I think your process will come out of that. And we'll talk more about finding your process next week. But So let's talk about sort of what does success look like for a writer, for an individual writer. So for you, Dawn, when you started writing, how did you define success for yourself? What were you trying to do?
Well, okay, so my definition of success has changed several times.
And it will.
Yes, and I think that's perfectly fine. I've gone, quick little history of Dawn's journey here. So I was trying to teach and write. And I have gone from, I wouldn't tell anybody I was even writing, to, okay, so I remember telling my husband, so I'm doing this thing called NaNoWriMo that, like, I'm going to write, like, and I'm totally expecting, like, and not that he's ever laughed at anything that I told him I wanted to do, but he was like, okay, what, all right. But that was like a huge step for me of, okay, people know I'm doing this. Right. And then, okay, so now I'm going to go to this writers meeting. Okay, so now I'm going to go to this other writers meeting. Now I'm going to this conference. And so it was very much building. Mm-hmm. Now, when I started this, which was a really long time ago, I absolutely wanted to get an agent and I wanted to be traditionally published. And all of those things. And then I started figuring out the process. And that was right as indie publishing started to shift to where people were like, this is a very viable career option here. And right about the time that I was trying to choose between which way do I want to go? Do I want to try doing indie? Do I want to keep querying, which was exhausting? Do I want to do all this? And then I started doing editing. And I had two very, very close friends that we were sitting at RWA, and I was talking about editing. And I remember they were like, so when are you doing your own writing? And I was like, well, I haven't really been doing my own writing because I have this client and they're doing this book and it's so much fun. And I've been doing this and I've been doing that. And one of them looked at me and said, so if you never get published yourself, but you help all these other authors get published, will you feel successful? And I don't know what kind of look I got, but evidently, according to them, like my face lit up like a puppy dog. And I was like, that would be amazing. And so they call it the dawn look of I found my spot. Yeah. And so my idea of success has changed. Would I still like to see some of my stories published and see somebody reading it and get that experience? Absolutely. But I have more fun doing what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And I don't think the person I was however many years ago who stepped into that first RWA meeting would be disappointed in who I am now. And I think that's important too. Yeah.
Well, that makes sense to me because my journey has been similar. I mean, totally different, but also similar in that the goalpost, and this is a good and bad thing. My measure of success changes constantly. My husband is a good, he's a good force for positive in my life because I tend to strive. If we're going to talk about Clifton strengths, I'm an achiever, and as significance is very high for me, and I'm a competitor. And so this comparison game is something that I indulge in too often. And it's very hard for me to champion my own successes. And so he's very good at making me do that. When I finish a book, I think I said this last week, he'll be like, you finished a book, let's celebrate that. When we hit the USA Today list, he was like, okay. And he brought home a bottle of Dom Perignon. And he was like, this is how you celebrate that. And I was like, okay.
You should totally keep him.
He's great. He is. And he's really good. He's a very practical person. So he really does help me look at my goal setting in a way that is a little healthier than I think the way I would normally do it, because he's the one to point out, well, first you just wanted to, get this short story published in a journal, and you did that. And then you decided you wanted to write a book. And so you did that. And then you wanted to get an agent. So you did. And like, he's good at measuring all that stuff, because all I see is, okay, I have the agent. Now I have to get a book deal. Okay, I have the book deal. Now I need a bestseller. Like so I think I'm a good example of kind of both what to do and what not to do. I tried to set small goals to start with and look at sort of the path that I might be able to follow, but I'm bad at acknowledging when I've actually hit one of those small goals, because I'm always focused on the big goal.
Right. And I think small rewards are very important. You've got to celebrate, which my Clifton strengths are completely different than yours. So, but
that's why we work well together.
Right. I'm not a high achiever. Competition is extremely low for me.
Do you have
Yes, number 2. But you did something good. You have to celebrate that, and you have to not, and this is where we talked about imposter syndrome last week. You have to not let the imposter syndrome sink in. You have to not be like, well, I only got published in I got a short story and it was only published in an anthology, and no, you did it.
Right. Well, and I'm lucky and also unlucky because I don't have that. I think because my significance is so high, I have always been like, okay, I did the thing. I'm going to do the next thing. Like, let's keep doing the things. We can do this. And I'm the person who looks at, Julia Roberts and thinks to myself, I probably could have done that. I just didn't want to be an actress. Like, So I think it's the opposite of imposter syndrome, maybe, and it's also equally unhealthy if it's allowed to go out of control. But I think both, somewhere in the middle of those two things is where you need to try to keep yourself. Acknowledge your successes, acknowledge that you have further to go if you want to. So how do people set goals that are reasonable and realistic?
Well, I think the first step to that is figuring out what do you see as a success? And I think that was what was so important about the question my friends asked me is because I think they thought I was going to try to do all of the things, which I'm guilty of doing. And they were like, you're going to have to figure out a way to balance this. But I think especially new authors, but even experienced authors, because this industry is changing so much that what was considered a success 5 years ago may not look the same right now.
And I think there are more paths to success in publishing than there ever have been before. More than ever before, you can kind of cut your own trail or choose from one of many trails rather than having to be forced into the funnel of find an agent, get a deal, all that stuff that used to be the only way. Mm-hmm. So I think if you are a relatively new writer, you need to look at what you're doing and ask yourself, what am I doing? What am I writing a book and why? Do I just want to tell a story? Do I want to see if I can do it? Do I need to see my name in print? Do I need to sign a deal with a big New York publishing house? Like, what is the thing that you feel like is your reason? And I think if your reason is I need to sign a deal with a big New York publishing house or something equally hard to attain, you may want to ask yourself why.
Right. Because that why is what's going to keep you going.
Well, or your why may be false. Because for me, that was one of my, I want to do that thing because my mom thought it was important, because she didn't understand indie publishing and she thought I wouldn't be a real writer until I had a book with Random House. But I did end up getting a book with Random House. And although my mom was super impressed, it's one of my least favorite books I've ever written. It did okay, I guess. But I thought it would just, I'd feel like I was on a hot air balloon for the next year after that happened. And no, because it wasn't my goal. It was a stupid goal that I was trying to do to please somebody else. So I really suggest that you examine your reasons for setting certain goals and make sure that they're true to you, or that if they're for somebody else, they're very important.
Well, and if you're listening to us right now and you're sitting back thinking, okay, how do I do that? There's several different resources available. Sarah Cannon's HB90 class, any of the Becca Signs Write Better Faster or Strengths courses, Power Sheets, which is a planner type thing that gets really into making you figure out why you're doing a goal. And then, of course, we have the coaching. So we can kind of help you a little bit there. But there's tons of resources out there to start looking at, why am I doing this? And okay, so like you were saying, do I just want to tell a story? Am I happy with the ebook only? Am I happy with a print book that I self-publish? Am I only going to be happy if I hit an Amazon list? Am I only going to be happy and you break those down and then you start looking at the steps you need to get there.
Right. Kate says, I'm late to writing, so I feel this time crunch to be successful. And I can say I identify with that. And in fact, the first book I ever wrote, I remember distinctly saying to my husband, if I'm ever going to do this thing, I guess I better do it now because I'm almost 40 and I don't, how much time do I have left? So I think the thing that I always tell myself, and I don't know how late to writing you are, but there are a lot of examples of very traditionally successful authors who didn't even write a book until they were 60. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. And the beautiful thing about starting later is that you have a wealth of maturity to draw from and hopefully a little bit more time to look at the resources that are available and really learn your craft.
Mm-hmm. And also with the comparison game, hold on, Kate's replying again.
Oh,
Go ahead.
6 siblings. Wow. She says, I'm one of 6 overachieving siblings. None of them know that I've written a book, let alone 6 books. What?
No,
Okay,
that's
there's
a
a whole other
banner that
loaded
says,
situation in there.
you're like, no, do you know how many books I've written? How many books have you written? I
Well,
mean,
I guess that's not what this episode is, but now I'm very curious why your family doesn't know what you're doing.
yeah, that's why you celebrate those successes.
Yeah, because how can you really celebrate it if you're not telling anyone? Because my first couple, I didn't tell anyone either because there was sex in them, and I thought that was sort of embarrassing. They think you're stupid.
Well, they're wrong.
They are wrong.
And there's a period at the end of that sentence, and that's all there is to it. They're wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen your work, so
yes. Yeah.
Anyway.
We have experience. We can speak on this. So what I was going to say about the comparison game too, though, is one of the things I think is very important when you're researching your steps on how you're going to get to this goal. And if you are comparing yourself to other authors or looking at them towards mentors or an example of what can happen, don't waste your time pouting, because there's going to be books out there that you're like, this has sold a bazillion copies and it's terrible. And yes, and no one can explain it. If we could explain it, we would have some kind of program, and Nancy and I would be very rich women at this point. But there's just this, there's always somebody who's going to do better. There's always going to be somebody who has success that you don't feel they deserved. But wasting your energy on that is taking away from your goal.
Yes. Think about all the good stuff you could be doing with that same brain space. And you can look at that like, hey, sometimes people get totally lucky for absolutely no reason. That could happen to me.
Yes.
Or, I mean, that's how I always look at everything.
Yes,
why not me?
Kate says it's something she's kept to herself, and it feels more precious. I'm going to fully support that. I'm going to take back that you should celebrate with them. You should celebrate with people who support you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you'll be surprised too. I mean, I assume you have friends who know, but I was very surprised by even the people who I was most reluctant to share my alter ego with, were very supportive and very enthusiastic and excited about it all. So you might be surprised. But
and I'm going to jump in for just a second, Nancy. You were talking about how your first book, or early in your career, you weren't really willing to share it because you wrote about sex. Mm-hmm. February is all about romance. We're getting through all of this setting up your world stuff that we're doing right now. And then February is going to be so much fun because we're doing all about romance. And we are going to do a show on, oh my God, my mother may read this someday. So that's going to be one of the shows that we have coming up, is how do you deal with letting people in your world know that you're writing about such scandalous pearl clutching, I don't have any pearls on, but pearl clutching things.
Bodice ripping.
Fabio. I'm already looking forward to that.
That's going to be fun. I'm excited about February. But I think let's go back a little bit to goals. So I suggest as homework that everyone who is working on this, kind of setting up their mindset, think a little bit about this and write down, why are you writing? What are you trying to do? And it might be a big picture thing, like this is what my life has always been about, or I've always dreamed about this. It could be big like that. That's a good reason. But it may be because I want to see my name on the Amazon store, or I want to see if I can finish a book, or whatever. So figure out your reason, and then figure out what is your goal. So you need 2 things, a reason and a goal. So your goal might be to get your book up on the Amazon store. Your goal might be to sell 100 copies of your book. It might be to have your mom read your book before she dies. That was one of mine. So write those 2 things down. And then as you think about your goal, it might be big. So like finish a book is big. So break it down. You've heard this before, into smaller digestible steps that are easy to achieve. And then, as Dawn says, reward yourself when you achieve those little steps. So for me, my writing goals, I use word count. That works well for me. I don't make myself go until I hit a certain word count, but I have a minimum word count that I try to cross every day. So, and it's usually about the size of a scene/chapter, excuse me. So every week I try to write 10,000 words. And when I do it, I get to move my little Post-it down to the next part of my Kanban board and feel like I achieved something real. And that works for me, but it might be something else for you. And your celebration may need to be something more like have a cookie, or I don't know. I feel like I've been blathering for a while.
Well, and again, like you said, the celebration needs to be something that's specific to you. So I do paper planning, and I've started getting into hand lettering, and I have this really almost unhealthy obsession with colored pens and pencils, and I like pretty things. So like, of course, since I'm doing editing, one of the things I did back around Christmas was I was swamped. I had a ton of editing that I needed to get done because I wanted to take the week of Christmas off. And so when I got that done, I went on Amazon and I picked out me a very pretty set of colored pencils and a nice little coloring book. And that was just for me. Nobody else got to tell me what I was picking out. I got to get it and it was all mine. And then, so I think you need to have something that is, you don't want it to be a punishment. You don't want it to be, well, if I don't make this, then I don't know, I have to go run laps or something like that. You know, you don't want to do that, but you want it to be something that you can look forward to and that you're going to enjoy. And even if it is, you move your little sticky note, or I get to put a sticker in my planner that says my word count for the day. Those little things are what's going to keep you going.
Yep.
And so you've got to kind of set up what works for you. And I wanted to say also with the homework that you're assigning, if you want to come share with us, if you want somebody to support you, we have the Story Strategy Saloon, and that is absolutely a post that we can put up where you can come share your goal. And I promise you, no one is going to laugh. No one is going to dismiss it, and no one is going to belittle it. I taught high school for 18 years. I can take care of the riffraff. That's not going to happen. So it's a safe space.
Yes. Very good. So let's see, what else do we need to hit on today?
I think we've hit everything we had planned today.
Well, so this is a little off the beaten path here, but I think that you have a good point with education. If you are a brand new, shiny, spanky new writer, then goals are hard to set, because it'd be like diving into a swimming pool for the first time and not knowing that your first goal should be to get back up to the surface because you've never swam. So as you're, wading into this very deep and complicated pool of publishing, education might be a goal. Read a couple craft books, or take weed through the 20 books to 50K site for a while and see what this indie thing is all about, or, join 3 different author groups and start seeing how authors interact on social media. Or depending on where you are in your journey, your goals may not be specific to publishing, writing. They might be more about learning, and that's completely appropriate.
Well, and whatever little step works for you. If you set up a Facebook page under your author name, that's step 1, and you can say, I'm taking a step towards my goal. So look at whatever little step works for you. There are tons and tons of resources of how to set the goals, and specifically for writing. And then there's also tons of resources of what you were just saying on what the steps in the craft and steps to getting published. And the internet has a lot of information out there. You can find it.
World. Yeah. Well, so what's our next plan? We've got one more week of kind of setting our foundation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So next week, we are talking about your process, and we're going to talk about figuring out what works for you. And we are also going to talk about how do you set goals, very specific writing goals related to that process.
So today we talked about kind of big, broader goals for like your career or for an entire book. How do you set those little mini goals when this is the way you write? So it's going to be much more interesting than it sounds, I promise. So we're
Well, I
doing
think
that.
discovering your own individual process is really interesting, because one of the things I always find most interesting is when a writer posts something about the way they work, about their process, about how it is that they get the thing done. I'm always just completely wrapped. I want to know that stuff. So it should be equally interesting trying to figure out what your own actual process is, because as we already said, looking at Nora Roberts and trying to be her is not a good process for you, probably.
And if you're not a brand new writer and you already have your process set and you already have kind of worked through some of this stuff, we would love for you to comment on what works for you, what doesn't work for you, things you've tried. So
how does your specific process relate to the goals that you set for yourself?
Right. Because while we talk about how everybody has a different process and you need to be aware of that and respect that, you can also borrow and steal little things to improve your process from other people.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll be talking about that. And our newsletter is going to go out next Thursday.
That's what they tell us.
That's the plan. And
the
so
good news on that is that someone is going to win the whole bundle of Becca Symes books.
Yes.
And that winner will be announced in the newsletter. So hopefully you are subscribed. If you're not, you can do that on our website. You can do it on our Facebook page. If I remember to, I will put the link
in the comments. But yes, so the newsletter will be going out next week. And we're talking about the process and realistic goals. And then, as we already said, February is going to be a lot of romance writing.
Yes. And do we have courses coming up out in the distant future?
Yes. Okay. The goal is for the conflict class that I am working on to be ready to go by the end of January. That is my goal.
Okay.
And I get a new set of pens when that goes up.
You get a set of pens. I have a goal on my Kanban board for a new course that will be up hopefully at the end of February. So that's on my calendar next month. So new stuff coming. Always have coaching if you need to chat, brainstorm, hit us up with ideas. And I think that's it for us today.
That is it.
All right.
Thank y'all for watching.
Hanging out with us. Have a great Thursday.